coming up.
You've written exclusively about Canadians can't even afford beer right now.
The reason why we're here today and we have this bill before us is because the leader of the New Democratic Party, Mr. Singh, talked a lot about grocery stores having excess profits. Given you're one of the leading experts in the country, can you tell us what an excess profit is?
The Grain Growers of Canada revealed today the capital gains inclusion rate changes will increase taxes by 30% on family-run grain farms. The question I have for you, are any increases on farms like the grain farmers in Canada, did those increases find their way down to the grocery store? Yes or no?
I'm just wondering, Mr. Pellado, if you got charged a special tax, would you absorb it or would you pass it on to the consumer, like I understand from my time of writing strategic plans for businesses that we always do? It's just the cost of business, is it not?
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
We will begin the first round of questions, which is 6 minutes, and we'll begin with MP Ryan Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses all for coming today in this important discussion of competition. Mr. Pellado, very interesting to hear that Glentel is working exclusively with Loblaws and shutting out Videotron. My first real simple question, has the ISED minister, the industry minister, or has the Competition Bureau addressed this concern? Have you talked to each one of them, and what did they say?
Yes, we mentioned this. In fact, we were in front we sent a letter earlier today. We spoke with them also during, the last few days. This decision is recent, and obviously, we're given the date, June 30th. We're looking to make sure that this will take place, and we're not going to be exited, this very important retail.
Time, did you get an answer from either one of them? Did you get any sense that there's a response?
Well, before going, at the Bureau, obviously, we addressed the issue with the principals, so the president, the CEO of Glentel, and the different other players involved in this transaction. As of today, I don't know if we receive any answers as of we're talking now.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Charlebois, we're talking a lot about food insecurity lately, and we're looking at how much more expensive food will get. The basket of food for Canadians in April 2021, if they bought that for $100, is now $121, so 21% increase. At the same time, we've seen the carbon tax go up 23% this year. Next year, it's supposed to go up another 19%. How do you foresee the carbon tax impacting food manufacturers across Canada, particularly in their ability to manage costs and maintain affordability for consumers?
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I appreciate the question. We've done some work on the carbon tax or the carbon pricing policy. We came to the conclusion it was really difficult to know beyond reasonable doubt how the carbon tax is impacting retail prices specifically, because a lot of different factors can impact retail prices. A retailer can decide to target one product as a loss leader, for example, or promote certain products. So it's very difficult. However, we did find some discrepancies up the food chain with wholesale and industrial prices, and there seems to be a growing gap between wholesale and industrial prices, food prices in Canada versus the U.S. since 2021. And that's quite concerning. So we're not suggesting that the carbon tax is contributing solely on increasing that gap, but we do believe that it is a factor.
Well, you've mentioned that. You've said that manufacturing is the forgotten child of the food supply chain, and we're certainly looking at carbon tax being a policy that has increased compared to our neighbors to the south, but also new now changes that are coming to capital gains adjustments to revitalizing food manufacturing in Canada, and we're talking about food insecurity. Are those changes going to result in increased food costs from these manufacturers, especially in Atlantic Canada and BC?
I mean, those signals aren't necessarily desirable if you want to grow an economy. For example, right now, the Cargill plant in Guelph is on strike, and I have visited that plant in the past. many years ago, and I can tell you that food processing, using that plant as an example, is undercapitalized, severely undercapitalized. And if you want to encourage investment, sending signals that you will increase taxes on capital gains, for example, and of course, the carbon tax policy is certainly not things that investors want to hear. So it's discouraging investments overall, I would say.
And when we look at, farming, you've written about restaurant owners as well, and this is affecting restaurant owners. We're hearing, when we look at food security, when we're taxing farmers more or restaurant owners as a whole or manufacturers, is Canada becoming more or less food secure?
It's problematic. The one thing that I'm hoping that parliamentarians will appreciate is that the food environment is all about low margins and high volume. The sector itself is often risk averse because of that nature, and it needs to be appreciated in terms of how do you actually allow the sector to grow. And so in order to assess whether or not the country remains food secure, you have to look at the level of competitiveness of the sector from farm gate to store or restaurant. And right now, I'm not sure we're going in the right direction.
If you've written on that or have some research, can you please submit that to the committee so we can have any evidence for this study, sir? And that would be appreciated. You've written exclusively about Canadians can't even afford beer right now. The price of beer is going up. This is obviously affecting anyone who just wants to enjoy a beer in Canada, where we are very proud often that we make beer in Canada. Is this an example of how you overload Canadians and kill an industry of taxes?
There's that, of course. Demand for beer has gone down 3.5% so far this year, and it went down 3.5% last year in 2023, so it's certainly not growing, and it is a very important sector. On the other hand, you do have microbreweries. We've had generous grants given to microbreweries in the past, and I would say that it was a great idea. The problem is that microbreweries aren't necessarily scaling up. They're closing down, a lot of them. And so my suggestion here would be to be more targeted and more strategic when it comes to supporting startups in Canada, especially when it comes to allowing SMEs or startups to scale up. This is something that we have not done a good job with in Canada over the last several years.
Mr. Charlebois, I'm really happy to have you here today. I follow you on Twitter, and I think you're a breath of fresh air in the academic community, especially because you talked about food hubs, and I come from the Fraser Valley, and we've started one in the Abbotsford Mission area, and your comments on scaling up food processing is especially relevant where I live. Earlier this year, I went to the Fraser Valley Mainland Milk Producers meeting, and we had Phil Vanderpool appear, and he put up on screen during his presentation what it actually costs to build the new butter factory that we're building in my riding. And basically, it's not even feasible anymore to do the project he started a few years ago, namely due to increase in input costs, the high production of labor, the lack of a competitive taxation system as it relates to investing in equipment. So specifically, to help food producers that want to process, what can we do from a taxation perspective to incentivize the purchasing of that new equipment that you talked about when you mentioned we need more automation?
No, it's a great question. I do recall in Quebec seeing the government there providing a financial incentive to Kraft Heinz to build a ketchup plant in Montreal, and I'm thinking, why not do that with Canadian companies? You see, in the last decade or so, in America, they've been able to build over 4,000 greenfield food processing plant. And during the same period in Canada, we have built less than 30 during the same period. And so when building new plants, it is quite costly because you're often confronted with a government, sometimes at the federal level, well, actually a lot of times at the federal level, because if you want to have a federally licensed facility, you have to deal with the CFI. There are a lot of costs involved, inspections. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved, and I think that at some point we need to decide whether or not we want to support processing and new ventures along the way. And your butter example is under supply management. So of all places we should invest is in supply management. In Ontario, in Kingston, we allowed China to build Canada Royal Milk in Kingston to manufacture baby formula. So that is a sign that we're not doing a good job enough to vertically integrate in this country, and we're allowing other countries to invest in our own country to do the work that we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Can you say anything specifically? I totally agree with you on CFIA, and they do not seem to want to work with our existing processors, and they actually make their job quite hard. Do you have any concrete recommendations about how we could reform the way CFIA conducts their inspections?
I could provide you with some detailed recommendations, but not at this time.
Thank you so much. I look forward.
I can after the
Thank you. The reason why we're here today and we have this bill before us is because the leader of the New Democratic Party, Mr. Singh, talked a lot about grocery stores having excess profits. To this day, I have not received a definition of what an excess profit is and what an excess profit specifically would be as it relates to grocery stores and the purchasing of food. Given you're one of the leading experts in the country, can you tell us what an excess profit is?
No, I cannot. And I've asked the same question to Mr. Singh, and I don't think there should be a definition. We should remind ourselves as to why companies exist in the first place. It's to make profits. I think what really needs to be underscored here is our ability to foster innovation, support competition, but also regulate. I actually do think that a lot of the anger out there coming from Canadians come from a place where they don't feel protected. And this is why I think this bill is really important, to empower the competition to do its job. We have a bread price fixing investigation that has been going on for 9 years, and it's still not done. And so Canadians have every right to feel angry and skeptical about what's going on. So what we've seen in recent days from the Constitution Bureau about property controls is a breath of fresh air. I think we need to see more of that.
I appreciated your comments during your exchange with Mr. Gahir about ensuring we have the conditions to foster competition. I don't believe we have those conditions, especially in the retail grocery store sector in our country, and that is why I am pessimistic about any of the provisions our party even has agreed to support about reducing the costs that Canadians are seeing at the grocery store. I think it's going to take a while to see competition come forward in this sector. So what are some key, maybe a couple of key things that come to your mind about ensuring the conditions for competition emerge?
Address interprovincial barriers as soon as possible. We need to deal with that. It's easier, talk to any agri-food companies, including in your own riding, I suppose, in the Fraser Valley. It is easier to do business with the United States than with other provinces. That's really a big problem. In Nova Scotia right here, we have lots of great businesses, but they can't expand because of some of these barriers. And so that's certainly the one thing I would do as quickly as possible.
MP Williams, up
you're doing
next
a great job otherwise.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Charlebois, the Grain Growers of Canada revealed today the capital gains inclusion rate changes will increase taxes by 30% on family-run grain farms. 30%. And they talked about this being an impact on those farms as a whole. And the question I have for you, are any increases on farms like the grain farmers in Canada, did those increases find their way down to the grocery store? Yes or no?
For the capital gain tax specifically, Mr. Williams?
Yeah, so and the Grain Growers of Canada specifically revealed that capital gains inclusion rate change will result in a 30% increase of taxes to those farms.
I haven't seen the evaluation today, unfortunately, but I would say that I'm surprised that this hasn't come up before. We did hear from other groups in the economy, but to suggest that this change only affects a minimal number of Canadians I think is misleading. I think it actually affects a lot of businesses, including in the agri-food sector, and I would start with farmers. So I'm not surprised to hear what I'm hearing right now.
So tell me what you've heard then on terms of these tax changes. It will affect farmers then? Is it going to affect manufacturers? Tell us what you're hearing in terms of what these capital gains tax changes, how they'll affect other Canadians.
Well, I mean, it affects planning. It affects planning for businesses, farmers. They have to think about the next generation. We've had issues with farming and the next generation, and how we get more people involved in the in farming. So that's certainly not something you want to do. You're discouraging investments. You're discouraging people to consider farming. And of course, you have to look at processing. And the thing about the agri-food sector is that we have a lot of family businesses, okay? And this is what's unique about the agri-food sector compared to other sectors. A lot of family businesses would look at this capital gain tax as detrimental to their own wealth and for their next generation as well. And I'm not sure we've discussed this enough since the introduction of this new bill by Parliament.
And given the fact that it's going to affect families and family farms, and a lot of them are, of course, concerned about prices already, and of course, through the Grain Growers of Canada, saying these prices are going to be added to the food bill. In your experience, is that going to result potentially in increased costs to consumers?
Like I said, I haven't seen the evaluation from the Grain Growers of Canada, unfortunately. But to suggest that this could actually have an impact on food prices would be premature at this point. We haven't done the evaluation, but I would consider that it may actually be the same argument that for the carbon tax, for example, where it's very difficult to really narrow down that one factor and how that one factor can impact. It will actually impact the productivity of our agri-food sector and the competitiveness of our food sector. But retail is always difficult. Over time, this could have an impact on our food security because we could actually see fewer farms or fewer players in the industry.
You've talked about bread price fixing, and given that the Competition Bureau's investigation into bread price fixing has been ongoing for over 9 years with limited action, resulting in only Canada Bread receiving a fine, how do you view the Liberal government's inaction in addressing this issue? And what do we need to do and make changes on to ensure that this doesn't happen again and be prolonged for 9 years, especially given the fact that the U.S. seemed to have made arrests and have bigger fines compared to Canada?
That's right. I mean, as an example, just to compare what's going on in the U.S. versus Canada, in the U.S., they had one case involving canned tuna. The CEO of Bumblebee Tuna was jailed for 40 months because he was found guilty of fixing prices for 3 years. In Canada with bread, allegedly the scheme was running for 14 years from 2001 to 2015. The investigation started in 2015 with Loblaw's disclosure. In 2017, we all learned about what went on. And we didn't hear anything about the investigation until last year when Canada Bread admitted guilt and paid a fine. this is just not acceptable, and that's why a lot of people are skeptical of the Competition Bureau's ability to solve anything. So with this property controls investigation, my hope is to see the Bureau act very quickly on this issue, because I think it's a real issue, and provide public recommendations so people can feel more reassured about what's going on.
Before I go to the next 5-minute round, MP Viss, maybe the committee could indulge me. And since we have one of the, if not the premier business leader in Quebec before our committee on that question, I'm just wondering, Mr. Pellado, if you got charged a special tax, would you absorb it or would you pass it on to the consumer, like I understand from my time of writing strategic plans for businesses that we always do? It's just the cost of business, is it not?
Well, you know what? I would say, Chairman, that, again, we introduce competition, and since it's there, it will remain competitive. So at the end of the day, if you pass or not the tax, the market will be that, people will be interested of having the product at the lowest prices possible and for the highest quality. So I would say it doesn't really matter if all the conditions are together or are assembled to make sure that, the competitive environment will be strong and viable.
Thank you, committee, and Mr. Pellado for the indulgence. MP Viss.